There is a bird at the window of room 7. It has been there for 3 mornings. The nurse on duty noticed it on Tuesday. A robin, sitting on the outside ledge, not eating, not moving, just sitting. On Thursday morning, the patient in room 7 passed away. The nurse wrote it in her personal notes, not in the medical record, just in her notes, because she had seen it before. This is not a ghost story. This is a pattern that hospice workers across the United Kingdom, the United States, and Australia have been documenting quietly for 30 years. And when researchers decided to stop dismissing it and start studying it, what they found was not mystical. It was stranger. Palliative care workers are trained observers. They spend years watching for small changes, breathing patterns, skin color, muscle tension, because in their work, small changes mean everything. So when nurses and care workers began independently reporting the same phenomenon across different hospitals, different countries, different decades, scientists eventually had to pay attention. The pattern was consistent. Birds, most commonly robins, blackbirds, and sparrows, would appear at windows or outside doors of patients who were within 24 to 72 hours of death. Not all patients, not all rooms, specific patients, specific rooms, specific windows. Surveys of hospice workers across multiple facilities found that a majority reported witnessing this behaviour at least once. A significant number reported it repeatedly. And these were not people comparing notes. Many had never spoken to each other about it at all. The detail that kept appearing across unconnected accounts was always the same. The birds were not agitated. They were not alarmed. They were not foraging. They were simply present, watching. Researchers studying palliative care environments eventually asked a different kind of question. Not, is this real? But, if it is real, what are the birds actually detecting? The starting question was simple. What is physically different about a person who is 48 to 72 hours from death compared to a person who is stable? The answer turned out to be quite a lot. In the final 48 to 72 hours of life, the human body undergoes a cascade of measurable biological changes. Circulation slows, and blood pools toward the body's core. Skin temperature drops at the extremities. Metabolic processes begin to shift. The body produces different ratios of volatile organic compounds, the chemical signals that every living body emits constantly into the surrounding air. These compounds are measurable. They change in specific ways during specific biological transitions. And they change in ways that differ from ordinary illness, from long-term decline, from medication side effects. Birds process environmental information through sensory channels we are only beginning to understand fully, including sensitivity to air pressure changes, electromagnetic fields, and chemical gradients that differ fundamentally from human perception. The hypothesis that emerged from the research was not mystical. It was this. The birds were not sensing death. They were sensing the specific biological signature of a body in the final stages of active dying. The smell of the process, not the outcome. Birds evolved as predators and prey in an environment where environmental information meant survival. A bird that could detect a weakened animal, one whose body chemistry had shifted into a vulnerable state, had a significant advantage. A bird that could detect change in its environment before that change became visible had a survival advantage. The sensitivity is not accidental. It is ancient. It is precise. Controlled observations using environmental samples from patients at different stages, stable, declining, and actively dying, showed measurably different behavioral responses in birds exposed to each type. Increased stillness, orientation toward the source, prolonged attention. The same behavioral profile that had appeared in independent accounts across 3 decades. The birds were not coming to watch someone die. They were responding to a signal the way any highly sensitive organism responds to an unusually strong or unfamiliar stimulus. They were paying attention to something they could detect, but we could not. The 48-hour window matters. It is not arbitrary. The specific volatile compounds that shift most dramatically in the final 48 to 72 hours of life are not the same compounds associated with illness or long-term decline. They are the compounds associated with a very specific metabolic transition, the point at which the body stops actively maintaining itself and begins a different process. Think of it like this. A car engine that is running roughly still smells like a running engine. The moment the fuel runs out, the smell changes completely. Different compounds, different ratios, a completely different chemical signature. The birds were detecting the fuel running out, and the robin outside room 7 arrived on the morning that transition began. Not the morning the patient died, 3 mornings before. The question that follows is, why would birds develop sensitivity to this specific signal? The answer is practical and ancient. Before hospitals, before houses, before cities. A large animal in the final stages of dying represented a significant food resource. Birds that could detect that transition early, before the animal died, before other scavengers arrived, before the competition, had an enormous survival advantage. The sensitivity that brings a robin to a hospice window today is the same sensitivity that helped its ancestors locate resources on a forest floor tens of millions of years ago. Evolution does not know about hospice care, it only knows about useful information. And the chemical signature of active dying is extremely useful information if you are a small bird in a large world. Here is where it gets more complicated. In the documented cases, there were outliers. Cases where birds appeared at windows of patients who were not in active decline. Patients who were stable. Some who recovered and were discharged weeks later. The current hypothesis for these cases is that the birds were responding to a different but chemically similar signal. Extreme psychological distress, severe metabolic disruption from medication, or acute physiological crisis that the body recovered from. In other words, the birds were detecting a real biological event, just not always the final one. But there is a subset of cases that remains unexplained. In multiple documented accounts collected across different facilities, birds appeared at windows of patients who showed no measurable biological markers of decline at the time. Patients who died unexpectedly, suddenly, without warning. The birds arrived 24 to 48 hours before events that the medical team did not anticipate. A 4-gram bird sitting on a window ledge, detecting something a hospital full of instruments did not. We do not yet know what that signal was, but the birds knew. There is a robin outside your window right now. Probably. If you live anywhere in Europe or the eastern United States, robins are among the most common backyard birds. They are in your garden, on your fence, on the ledge outside your kitchen, and they have been running their analysis of your neighborhood every single day. They know when something has changed in the house on the corner. They are not magical. They are just paying attention in a way that we stopped paying attention a very long time ago. The nurse in room 7 kept watching for the robin every morning. She said it never came to a window where nothing happened, not once in 11 years. Science now has a mechanism for that. It just took us longer to find it than it took the birds to already know it.